Okay. Hey, Derrick.
What's going on, Alize?
How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. How are you?
I am good. I'm loving this view behind you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. New views, new views.
Yes, new views. Well, I am super excited to chat with you. It has been just amazing to see your growth. This is a friendship that spans a really long time. Like really
Over a decade.
And again, it's just amazing to see how you've progressed, how you have leveraged your passion for sport and technology. You have taken over the East Coast, it feels like, and beyond. So, really excited to hear about the work that you are leading and specifically tap into the conversation on how that aligns with philanthropy, and to hear how you align philanthropy in your own personal, like, day to day. So, without any further ado, I want to introduce Derrick. Derrick, tell us about yourself. Who are you? What you're working on? All the things.
Love it, love it. So, full name is Derrick Thomas. I like to go by my initials, both publicly and personally. Professionally and personally. Um, I'm from New York City, born and raised. Left New York at a very early age to attend a boarding school at 14 years old, which took me to Boston, then eventually to DC, where we met, um, and then further to college at Drexel University, where played basketball there. I was on a basketball scholarship. Then I left there, took my talents around the world before landing at Tesla. That's where I started my career in tech, at an emerging tech startup at the earliest days. Um, Doing a little bit of business development, strategy, sales and marketing, and logistics before leaving there, going into private equity, and then eventually landing on solving a few problems on my own, um, with my own venture-backed tech startups. And so my career has taken so many turns in a very healthy direction, and most of it came down to curiosity, understanding market transitions, and following the things that I found most passionate in and aligning with my values. So here I am as the VP of the innovation economy at JP Morgan, where I focus on supporting, elevating, and helping to bank the top startup founders in the East Coast. Um, we focus on ensuring that they have all the banking solutions, but also wrap the JP Morgan platform around them so that they can scale, launch, and essentially put them in a position where they would be able to scale their businesses and reach successful outcomes and be provided with resources that are unparalleled as they look to go from A to Z, from early stage startup to essentially IPO or acquisition.
Well, wow, that was a mouthful.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that I love the most is, in your title, and just even when you talk to you, if you spend 5 minutes talking to Derrick, community is going to come out of
Yes,
his mouth. And you really have ensured that community has remained at the root of your work. And so excited for this role for you at JP Morgan. I think this is going to be amazing. It's definitely like solidifies all the work you've done up until this point. So really excited to see what you do in this role. For today, I really want to talk about tech runs, and
yes,
it's is your baby. It is the thing that really I feel like it's safe to say really put you in this position.
for sure.
So really want to talk about like the background and your personal experience shaping tech runs and like what inspired you to start.
Gotcha. Well, look, in the earliest days, obviously, I mentioned I was from New York City, born and raised in Harlem. There was a basketball court in every corner. So I played a lot of sports growing up. Um, and what I learned about sports is it was a community building, endeavor, right? No matter where I played around the world, sports unified. It brought people together. It was like a universal language. It was a like when I got on a court, whether I'm in China, Turkey, Seoul, South Korea, or New York, or LA. Um, People, once you're on that court, they communicate with the game in a way that is just nothing like nowhere else. So, as I rose in my career, I also started to expose myself to technology, to business, and also the problems that were occurring in the world. Um, Tech runs came about as a result of understanding that there was emerging technology occurring, such as like blockchain technology, cryptocurrency. And at the time, um, I was exposed because of my previous private equity role. And by being exposed, I saw that there wasn't a lot of people that looked like me. I didn't see my reflection enough in these spaces. And I saw and I recall from the early days of like the dot com boom, where early adopters made a lot of money and created generational wealth. So I wanted to find a way to make sure that we didn't miss out and that we were participating. And so what that looks like is I started to evaluate the market, understanding that there was things that were being built, and the things that were being built in the marketplace weren't really targeting, the Black and brown community at first, or communities of color, or further, just communities outside of the people that just understood that technology. So Tech Runs was built out of an incubation of my original company called Dow Labs. And Dow Labs launched, managed, and scaled culturally relevant communities using blockchain infrastructure. And the problem that we wanted to solve is instead of trying to onboard the masses into Web3, I thought, what if we can bring Web3 down to the masses by doing things that we natively understand and embed the infrastructure into those native activities? So what that looks like is, hey, let me take my background in sports, finance, and tech and marry it together. So I took sports, which I found to be a universal language, something that people can easily understand, and it was culturally relevant. And I took, business and tech to actually create more of a more sustainable community. And so together, think of Tech Runs as becoming a Soul House meets Rucker Park, right? Where we brought people together around sport, but while they were there, these entrepreneurs, investors, and creators were learning, building, and investing in one another. And so I took this model I borrowed this model from golf clubs and country clubs where they play sport and they did business together. And from there, by allowing myself to put something in front of people that was culturally relevant, it made the adoption process a lot simpler. And as a result, hundreds, hundreds of folks came together to learn about this technology and furthermore start to find their pathways and eventually became like more, they went from novice to essentially, experts in their own field. So it's really cool to watch that scaling process happen. And that was the beginning of this.
I mean, you talk about it with such ease, and I know someone is sitting there like listening, and they're like, I have that amazing idea. I know what my passions are. I've probably even started, but I'm running against some challenges, right? So, can you share what were some of those challenges that you ran into in the early stages of building this?
In the early stages, it was about adoption. The fact that one was fundraising, right? Having the resources to actually, you know, see that vision through, right? And I was blessed to meet a couple people through countless networking opportunities where I met different people from different places. And I met a gentleman who worked at Spotify, and then another guy that worked at Snapchat that would meet with me on a weekly basis. And as a result, they're like, hey, let me introduce you to this venture studio called Science Ventures. And they connected me to Science Ventures. Science Ventures heard my pitch, heard what I was building, and they got behind it. And then my advisor became Mike Jones, he was the former CEO of MySpace, and he helped me build this thing to become what it needed to become. Well, what it ended up becoming thereafter. So the early days, the challenges were making sure that I was on time. I was a little early about around the things that I was building. Um, the challenge that I also felt outside of fundraising and just being early adopters was making sure that the product felt culturally relevant, and it was different than the current landscape that was already being produced. And the people that I was speaking with made sure that I was able to communicate this high level technology in a very like, understandable, easy path. Excuse me, not path, but easy, like easy to break down, easy format, so that they can ingest it in a way that they can actually explain it to others as well.
I mean, that last piece is really the hardest piece, when you have this idea and it exists in such a magnitude, right? And how do you break it down in layman terms so people feel connected and related to it? And I think, just kudos to you for being able to, one, identify the mentors and the individuals that you needed in your life to kind of move you along. But again, also recognizing that this idea, in order for it to be meaningful, it needs to connect and it needs to be simplified. And I think
Right.
even in philanthropy, I think many times we find that issue is that, like, you make it too grandiose and it's hard for folks to digest it, right? So now they don't want it, especially in a world where like our attention span is like what, 8 seconds. We're battling for so many things are battling for our time. uh,
Right.
it's really tough. So, like for us with We Give To, we always want to know, like, how does the philanthropic aspect come in to anyone's work? Because I do think it is, right? Going back to my original comment about community being at the forefront of who you are, and being that like foundation for you and your work. So, curious to hear, like, what was the tie and the connection to philanthropy and to community? Was it really obvious at first? Or, was it something that, because it is so ingrained in who you are, the DNA was already in the makeup of the business?
So it came about in like four different ways. Just it started off with just me having a therapist, to be honest with you. And in my therapy, having countless sessions where they made sure that I didn't think about just money or as a form of success, but I also thought about legacy. I have two sons that are 7 and 10 now, and all of my decisions are based off my values set. Like I have four things or five things that I value, and I always test those things based off the major decisions I have to make in my life. And it always came down to profits and purpose. It wasn't enough for me to just be profitable in all the things that I was able to do, but it also be intentional and making sure that if I, for instance, if I took a football at the end line and I threw it down, down the field and it goes to the 60-yard line, that's my work. That's my efforts that I did. My goal is to make sure that my sons can pick it up at the 60-yard line and not at the end line where I started. So, like, and then they can throw it further so that our legacy can continue. So that thought process um, played a huge role in the way in which I operated from a philanthropic perspective. The second thing is basketball. I played at New Heights, which was a big program that thought about, it was a very foundation, very philanthropic thought process around student being a student athlete. And everything at the early days was always, all right, the way you repay me is by paying it forward. So I had that ingrained in my mind at all times as I was growing up from 14 and on. And then the last was the nature of the technology that I was leveraging. It was about owning your own narrative, owning your infrastructure, owning your data. It was about owning the value you create. So, by sheer nature, every person that joined Tech Runs owned a piece of Tech Runs because the technology, the currency was was embedded into the membership protocol, which means that when people went out and created value for this network, they created value for themselves. So just inherently by the nature of the technology and why I chose to use that particular technology to support the development of it, it was because of the way in which it gave back, the way it created legacy, the way it created generational wealth for those who participated and not just watched.
Passion and profit. I mean,
Yeah.
that right there is really the gem. And I think one, shout out to you for going to therapy. Black
Of
men in
course, of
therapy,
course,
right?
of course.
um, but again, also being able to simplify your mission statement for yourself, right? And then being able to build upon that, and like even asking the question, you were like, it's in in 4 parts. Um, I think for those that are listening, again, we all innately, especially Black and brown folks, like we innately have service at the core of our hearts, like, right, like everything that we do, everything we come from is based in service. And I think despite the philanthropic space and sector being painted a certain way and being dominated by particular individuals, we feel that disconnection, and we don't think that our mindset around philanthropy or service equates to what philanthropy is, right? And I think something as simple as starting in-house and thinking about how you want to move your, family legacy forward, there's a philanthropic service aspect of that. And then you take that attitude outside, right? And it's, if I'm able to do this and I have to do this for my neighbor or the next person, just within my radius of my inner circle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so I
I think
really appreciate you for just like sharing that. What were you about to say?
no, I think that you just nailed it. What I didn't share was, when I thought, if you're thinking profit and purpose, you're thinking, again, my own personal mission is what I did to your point of view, is make sure that I'm better, like people are better off because they met me, and that's key, right? Like, so how do you create that space to ensure that people are doing that? And by switching your perspective there, it allowed me to just continuously be better, to continuously learn more, to build my social capital, my intellectual capital, my political capital, make sure that like I can open up doors for folks. Like all those things is, while it's serving me, it's also serving others, because what I'm going to do with that is to give. Um, so you all got to give too, right? No pun intended.
No pun intended. I want folks to know, again, you have so many things going on right now. You have the new role. Um, is there a way that folks can support Tech Runs? Is there a way that our audience can help leverage, elevate the work that you're doing, especially in this new season?
Mhm.
If you have a call of action, we would love to hear it.
Yeah, yeah. So the beauty of all the work that I was able to do is I was able to, at a great time last year, um, partner or essentially build this business to scale it to a point where it was attractive for others to want to acquire it. And that's exactly what happened. Last year, um, I had a couple acquisition partners that were interested in buying Tech Runs and its IP, and essentially that's what happened. I went into the negotiations, and I saw that I can find a new home for it, and it can and leverage that new platform and infrastructure to can scale it to become something greater than it was at that point. And essentially, there was a guy named Porter Braswell. He's an incredible founder himself, who built incredible software, and he was acquired by a huge platform called True Search, and his company uh, helped and support diversity led, or just the diverse professionals get into tech. And the next step for him was like, how, okay, now that you're getting into tech, how do I change the face of leadership by helping you rise and become more, strong, proficient as a professional, and more happy as a person in your identity, and while you're seeing your reflection. And so he built 2045, and 2045 acquired Dow Labs, which eventually, took on the IP of Tech Runs. And by acquiring that company, it allowed Tech Runs to have a new home where folks that were members and or uh, professionals of color can now leverage this private network to scale their business, to reach successful outcomes, to go to different events and experiences, to help them both grow, to grow both personal and professionally. Now, at so the way in which you can help Tech Runs is to help 2045, right? To be a part of the network, to attend some of the events and experiences that they're having. and also to continuously support their growth and development and feedback. So for me, now that I made the next step on, joining JP, it allows me to help tons of different types of startups. But at that time, I think the key thing is making sure that folks are able to, if they could, just reach out to me directly on socials or to attend some of the events that we put together at 2045, or just support any other endeavors that I plan to come out with next.
Thank you, Derrick. And before we close, we always like folks to end with completing this sentence. So I
Okay,
give two because.
that's a great question. Great statement. Great statement. I give two because it's the only way for us to get further. Simple. It takes a village.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Derrick, for chatting with us. And as Derrick shared, support 2045 in order to support tech runs. Be on the lookout of all the amazing work that he's going to be leading out of JP Morgan. If you are entrepreneur looking to grow your business in tech in this entrepreneurial space, Derrick is your guy. And as we shared, as you're thinking about how you grow your business and still remain focused on philanthropy, think about your mission statement. Think about how does your passion and profit align to move your work along as well as your community. So with that, we are going to see you all later. And Derrick, it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.